Okay.
She will. She'll be perfect. Don't worry about it. Just relax and just talk to me like you were talking.
Okay.
We were doing great.
What are your career goals for the future?
To get out alive right now. But I mean, I've pretty much done everything in news. I'm working on a novel now. There's some other things that I'd like to do in my life. I'm writing a novel about cloning Christ from the Shroud of Turin and doing some other things. And I've done some. I do 3D animations like from still images, like you've seen. The kid stays in the picture, where you see you take still images and make them look like video.
Yeah.
And I did that for a documentary that just debuted in town a couple of weeks ago called Lube Job, about how the oil industry is ruining Louisiana. But those are kind of my new interests. But I always try to learn something else all the time, and be aware that, for instance, like a lot of jobs in televisions have gone away. There are no editors in televisions anymore.
Yeah.
Editors were a whole third of the employees when I started. Now they're not there. We cut our own video at the desk. So I would say always just be nimble and know that if you can create content, you'll have a job.
Can you tell me a little bit more about this novel that you're writing?
Well, the novel that I'm writing is based on the idea of the Christian myth of the return of Christ. And in this novel, kind of an evil genius who knows he's going to die wants to clone Christ so he can take transfusions from him and have everlasting life. And so he grabs a piece of the Shroud of Turin, which is the burial or the mythical burial cloth of Christ, and has a baby cloned from that cloth. And the ensuing mystery is trying to find out where the child is, if it's the Christ or the Antichrist, and if it's who has it. It's kidnapped. It's taken from the mother. The mother is a pop star. She's found at the bottom of a hotel in Las Vegas, like she's jumped, and the baby's missing. So nobody knows where the baby is, and so that's kind of the.
Where did the inspiration for this novel come from?
Because I'm crazy, I guess. I don't know. No, the shroud has always kind of fascinated, and Christian theology has always kind of fascinated me. And I've always wondered what it would be like. For instance, one of the components is this. There's a this is kind of off the subject, but there's a famous vision that 3 children in Portugal saw the Virgin Mary giving them the secrets of Fatima, they're called. One predicted the assassination of the Pope. One predicted World War II, and in my novel, the 4th one predicts how Christ will come back, and it's by the hand of man. So that's kind of the. It's probably a little much.
Yeah, it is. How did you get start in media?
Well, I was working as a waiter in Nashville, in Tennessee, where I grew up, and I was waiting on a newsroom secretary, and I'd always had some interest in media, and I had been taking like a junior college class in radio or something, and she mentioned that they had a writer job open. She was kind of drunk, and I said, well, I'm a good writer, and she said, why don't you come by and try out for the job, which I thought was great. And I went and I wrote for the news director a short story about my childhood, and he hired me based on that. I really knew nothing about television or media or journalism or anything else, and I kind of learned on the job there, and that was an interesting place. James Earl Ray, who killed Martin Luther King, used to call in there from Brushy Mountain because he didn't like jail conditions, and I can remember one of our reporters going live into a penitentiary where there was a riot. So it was a very good place to learn. And after that, I drove out to Los Angeles without a job because I'd always wanted to live here, and I worked as a waiter and picked up. They have per diem shifts, like day call shifts for writers, that for people that get sick or people on vacation and things like that. Did that for a while until I got a regular job as a writer, and then became a producer, and then became an executive producer, and the rest has been all the way down.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your background and childhood in Tennessee?
Well, I grew up in kind of a lower middle class suburb in Tennessee. There were a lot of country music people that lived there. I never really felt at home where I grew up. It felt like an odd place to me. Mm-hmm. I think I was a fairly bright child.
Wow.
And a fairly, it's never felt like I should be there. I felt a little at odds with the whole culture of the place. Seemed strange to me.
Yeah.
But I read a lot as a kid. I can remember reading Darwin's Origin of the Species when I was like in 7th grade or something, and things like that. I always tried to read above what I understood so that I would continue to learn things. I don't know where that urge came from, but I always had it.
What kind of a kid were you growing up? Because you just told me that you read Darwin's The Oranges of Life and The Origins of Life, and that's a pretty.
Well, I was a pretty
yeah.
strange kid, I guess. I mean, I read a lot of things. I read Freud. I read a lot of things, and this was so much at odd to me because the kids there were talking about, they were voting for George Wallace, and they were little rednecks,
Okay.
and it was a lot of them were. I mean, and it was I really didn't have any intellectual companionship for most of my life, or things that I could talk to people about, people that I could talk to things about. So that's, that was one of my motivations for moving out here. And I think Los Angeles is a great place to recreate yourself because there aren't, you don't have any of the expectations or anything of home that you do there.
Speaking of Los Angeles, when did you come here and why, and how has it changed you?
I came in 1985, and I came because I'd always wanted to live here since I was a boy. I liked what I thought was the mythology of it, and I really wanted to change. I wanted to go somewhere where I could, in a sense, become a different person and become the person that I am. And so I just drove out here without a job. I left the job that I was at, just drove out here on a whim, just to see what I could do. And I would encourage you when you're young to take chances. You're not gonna look back and say, well, I wish I wouldn't have taken that chance. You're gonna look back and say, wow, I wish I would have done that.
How did joining NBC News change you as a person?
Well, NBC hasn't changed me that much as a person because I've worked at 10 different stations probably in 10 different cities and 10 different markets. So they're all a bit different, but they're all a bit the same. I would say that NBC is a more traditional newscast and a more conservative, safe newscast of record than some of the places I've worked before that have done more outrageous things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also it's a very comfortable place to work. It's a friendly place to work. And I think the quality of the journalism is very good there.
What other things do you like about NBC?
It's a very friendly, some stations there's a lot of rivalries and there's a lot of intramural fighting.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really any of that there. When you walk in, I feel like I'm among friends and I'm working with friends.
Yeah.
And they do things right. I mean, they're not looking for shortcuts. They're not looking to trick people into watching. It's a good newscast.
Does that make it easier to go there and for you to feel less stressed?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked at jobs where I literally felt like I was going to throw up before I went in every day.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, I mean, I've just worked in situations where I'm the guy who's hired from outside to change things. For instance, I went to Seattle.
Wow.
And nobody could stand me because, I mean, they had brought me in to change the culture there. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult. Nobody likes the guy who's going to come in and change everything.
Tell me about those situations, those stressful situations.
Well, I mean, sometimes the situation is created by the people. I mean, sometimes what you're asked to do is difficult.
Yeah.
Like you might come into a place that has a long tradition of doing a show a certain way.
Okay.
They're used to doing it their way, and the management hires you to come in and change it into a different product. Mm-hmm. And so it's like trying to change your children. It's very difficult because people don't want to do what you want to do. And so you have to find a way to persuade them that this is in their best interest. But there's a lot of conflict. There are people that will say, I don't want to run that story. And, and I have to tell them, well, you have to put that in. This is the way we're doing it now. And that's not popular a lot of times, and it doesn't make you feel very good to do it.
If you weren't at NBC, what would you be doing? You can drink your water first.
Well, I do like writing, and I think I might have been a novelist, or might have been a print journalist, or hell, I might have ended up on a factory line in Tennessee somewhere if I hadn't got that break. You never know what would have happened to you. I see a lot of people that are frustrated in jobs that they do now, mm-hmm. and sometimes I wonder, well, would that have been me had I stayed and not taken a chance or not had this opportunity? You always look back in retrospect and wonder, but you can't know. You can only know in hindsight. Mm-hmm. You can't, you always have to just move how you think is best, and then when you look back, the dots begin to make sense, how they connect, but you can't see that ahead of time.
Are you popular back home in Tennessee?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think one of the miracles of Facebook is that I've reconnected with so many people that I went to high school with and didn't really know in high school that much. But I don't have any particular ties to any place. I've lived a lot of different places, and my life is pretty much the same wherever I live. And one of the things, if you're going to get into media, particularly if you're going to get into news, that you should prepare for is that you're probably going to move a lot.
Okay. Well, Steve, thank you for coming and being on the show.
Thank you very much.
And I'm your host, Leila Vaha today, with Steve Weakley. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.